Right, hello everyone, Jay Sri Mataji. So tonight we'll follow the usual format. I'll give a talk about something that I'm interested in, that I hope will be interesting to you. And then we'll have an extract from a talk of Sri Mataji's, and then we'll have meditation. So what I wanted to talk about tonight is this. Dr. Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychologist, writer, and public intellectual, detested by some, loved by some, has, as you may know, started a new venture called SYUK, which stands for the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. It held its first conference in London this week. A lot of influential people were involved, and 73 countries were represented. SYUK is not a political movement as such, but a kind of forum for an open discussion between relatively like-minded people about finding a new motivation in a jaded world, a new optimism about the possibilities of our human society, when many people view the future with dread. As Peterson argues, this future is in the balance. Everything is moving very fast. We have the capacity to construct a truly beautiful society, or we have the capacity, with our entrenched divisions combined with new technology, to make a hell on earth. Listening to some of the speakers at this conference, I'm very encouraged, really encouraged. I feel it's an important thing that's been happening, and it's auspicious that London should have been chosen for its venue. Coincidentally, at the same time that another conference on the future, this time concerning AI, was being held at Bletchley Park here in the UK. The speakers at the SYUK conference are genuinely aware of the problems that lie behind the problems, or in other words, they are aware of the moral failings, the deviations in the way that people have been behaving, particularly since the 1950s. The philosophical errors that have become embedded in the way so many people think about things, and so on. These deeper problems that lie behind the material problems that confront us. I'll give a simple concrete example. This was a talk by Miriam Cates, Member of Parliament, person I have a lot of respect for. She was talking about the disturbing numbers of children who start school these days without having been potty trained. So it's a small sort of everyday feature, but it really, shows up the state of things. This is something new. People never used to send their children to school in nappies. It's a great nuisance for the teachers who would rather be doing something constructive than changing those nappies. It's a drain on valuable resources. But it's also a symptom of deeper problems with our contemporary society. It's a sign of deep decline, a sign of loss of confidence and of an abdication of personal responsibility. It's a sign of a loss of self-respect on the part of adults. It's certainly a sign of family breakdown, which is such a huge problem in itself. Is it that parents, in this case, it's more likely to be mothers and fathers, don't have the time because they're single parents with jobs to potty train their own children? Or is it that they don't have the inclination because they've been conditioned into thinking that the state is responsible ultimately for everything and should do the job for them? Or is it a sign of this Rousseauian, child-centered philosophy which has taken such a hold on modern culture, whereby children are not to be disciplined or treated in any way that might cause them discomfort, but must be indulged at every turn? It's probably a mixture of all these things, but whatever the reason, it presents us with a very sorry state of affairs. So that was a small example. Of course, there are lots bigger problems. The people speaking at this SYUK conference, or some of them certainly, are genuinely aware of these deep cultural problems facing us. They are genuinely seeking something. These are people at a level of society where you would never normally hear or expect to hear any talk about the transcendent, the divine, and the pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful. Yet here they were openly talking about these things. So I've been reflecting on this conference. I was trying to think of something I could say that would be relevant and perhaps helpful. All the talks, by the way, and the discussions from the conference are on YouTube if anybody is interested. But for me, it raised the old question of what kind of thing Sahaja Yoga actually is. I mean, it sounds obvious, we know what it is, but in a kind of deeper way. We know where it begins with the Kundalini ascending through our Mother's grace, but where does it end? That is, we know it's a Mahayoga that is meant to change the world, but how? One way of describing Sahaja Yoga, it's a bit cumbersome maybe, but it makes sense to me, is as an actualization that is totalizing. It has to flow into everything. Our society, our arts, our culture, our social relationships, forms of law and government, and so on. It has to flow everywhere or it will stagnate. But how do we envisage this happening? Perhaps we mainly, if we think about it, if we think about sort of bigger picture working out, maybe we mainly see it working out by very gradually spreading self-realization from one person to another. This is a painfully slow process, as we know. A tiny percentage of those who even get their realization in the first place take it any further. I'm not criticizing this process of holding meetings and trying to spread realization at all. I've spent the last few decades trying to help to make it happen. But I feel it's only part of a larger process. One idea of Sahaja Yoga, of what it is, I don't know if it's the dominant understanding of this yoga, but it's certainly a major formulation of it in practice, seems to risk turning it into another religion. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little in order to make the point, but we meditate at home, we go to pujas, we have our rituals and so on, and it all tends to take place in a bubble, separated off from the rest of society and the rest of our activities. I mean, we're involved in society, we can't help being involved, and we have these other activities. But the way we practice Sahaja Yoga, not necessarily deliberately, but just by virtue of the way we do it, can be like Christians spending most of the week thoroughly embedded in the material world, then going to church on Sundays to get their little spiritual connection. In some places where in Sahaja Yoga, there's a great deal of emphasis on leaders and organization and protocols and so on. Sahaja Yoga seems to me definitely in danger of becoming another sterile religion instead of a universal evolutionary happening. It always suits the purposes of those who are interested in power to limit the scope of this yoga, because that way it's easier for them to control it. They can't just slip away from them. But this idea of Sahaja Yoga as basically a religion or a spiritual organization can go together with a tendency to shut down any discussion about cultural and social matters, because they exist outside the bubble, apparently. In our local collective, even, for example, it would, I know, be very difficult to generate much interest in ARC, or it doesn't have to be ARC, it could be something similar. Some people would decline to get involved because they wouldn't want to engage in anything they feel might be controversial. They're not political, they don't like arguments and the divisiveness that comes with politics, and who can blame them? But still, there's almost a bunker mentality here. The world out there is full of negativity. We don't want to risk contamination. Let's not discuss these subjects. Let's not go there. Others wouldn't want to get engaged in this instance because they would feel ARC is basically a conservative event, conservative with a small c, and therefore it must be bad, end of story. True, it is conservative, I would say, from what I've seen of it, in the sense that these are people who really value the family as an institution, who value tradition up to a point, who want to preserve the Maryadas as they understand them, and who generally turn a cold eye on gender politics and the queering of the world, in which people who regard themselves as politically progressive are so interested. But that doesn't mean that everyone involved in ARC has to be or is a Tory or a Republican or whatever, not at all. But as I say, I'm talking about ARC because it's something contemporaneous with this talk, but it could be something quite different, but also concerned with our contemporary culture. Anyway, whatever the causes of this disinclination to get involved, I find it disappointing. It's not a very good analogy, but in their need for answers, in their expression of this, these public intellectuals, these seekers, are, as it were, providing the socket. And we who have the fundamental answer about Kundalini, Mother, yoga are offering the plug, but put together and we'll have light. But somehow the plug won't quite fit the socket. Perhaps it won't stretch that far from where we're standing. It's almost there, but not quite. Anyway, the socket is fixed in the wall. It's we who have to move closer. So I feel we should be putting our attention on these things like ARC. I'm not talking about necessarily getting directly involved. We'd have to be very articulate, very confident of ourselves and of what we think and feel before making any interventions in the public realm without embarrassing ourselves. I had an experience once, a long time ago, where I was on the point of meeting Kathleen Raine, who, I'm sure she's dead now, but she was a poet. I didn't particularly care for her poetry, but she had done some really important work on Blake. I mean, one of the best books I've come across on Blake is by her. And she was, at the time, she was connected with an initiative started by Prince Charles, as he was then. And I just about set up a meeting with her, but before I could get to see her, some other Sahaj yogis, unknown to me, met up with her, and I don't know, the connection was spoiled. Maybe I too would have blundered in on her as I felt that they had done. But you see my point. We have to be very good at what we do if we're going to go out into the public realm. But here, I'm just talking about using our attention. We can do, as we know, a lot with our attention if we use it meditatively as witnesses. And we shouldn't be afraid of getting caught up. The negativity should be afraid of us. It's also noticeable in this regard that in Sahaj Yoga, our heroes tend to be dead heroes, people like Gandhi and Lincoln, so on, who've had an official seal of approval. Or we'll happily quote some old Native American chieftain about how everything was absolutely wonderful until the white man came along. Yet we seem to be reluctant to get our hands dirty in the social and philosophical business of the present. Maybe at the times of general elections and so on, yes, we'll take sides, we'll make our voice known. But I feel that usually we don't like to identify ourselves in any way with living thinkers or political people, because perhaps of a feeling that everyone out there, outside the bubble, is more or less spoiled, or because, which I agree is always a possibility, you never know what a living person will do next. And just when you said that so-and-so is a wise man or a wise woman, and you've recommended, your friends listen to some YouTube lecture by them, and then the next thing they go and do is something really stupid. So, this can happen. But I feel we should definitely applaud good things when we find them. There's a beautiful poem, in my view, by Czesław Miłosz, a great Lithuanian Nobel Prize-winning poet, which kind of chimes with this, and I'll just read it out. He's talking about something slightly different, which is, the title of the poem is On the Inequality of Men. And the idea, which seems obvious to me, that people, human beings are of different qualities. Not everyone is equal. Anyway, he says, "It is not true that we are just meat that for a moment prattles, moves, desires. The throngs of bare bodies on the beaches are wrong. So are the crowds on the escalator in the metro. We don't know who the person next to us is. He may be a hero, a saint, a genius. For the equality of men is an illusion, and the tables of statistics are a lie. My own impulse to admire instructs me in the existence of a hierarchy daily renewed. I walk on an earth that harbors the ashes of an elect. though they last no longer than the ashes of others. I confess to my esteem and my gratitude, as there is no reason to be ashamed of these noble feelings. May I prove to be deserving of that high company and walk with them, holding the hem of the king's garment. So he's saying something slightly different, but there's that, that he's saying about this desire to admire people who are admirable and noble, and it's a noble desire, and we should do this. Anyway, in the sense that Sahaja Yoga is a spiritual organization which exists in a bubble, or can do, at once above and protected from the culture all around us. This reminds me of something that happened to me years ago, which rather sums the matter up. I think things have definitely changed since this event, but maybe it's still relevant. Sri Mataji had encouraged me to write a substantial book on art, as I'm always telling people. I did finally write it. One of the pieces of research I wanted to do for it was to go to Ely Cathedral. It's a major medieval building in the east of England. It's a long way from where I live. But it's not far from Shudi camps. So I thought it would be nice to stay overnight there, look at the cathedral, then drive back to Bristol. I rang the man who was in charge of Shudi Camps Park House at the time, or who thought he was in charge of it, to ask if I could stay. And very begrudgingly, he said yes. But then, just before I was due to set off, he rang up and said, no, I couldn't come after all, because what I wanted to do had nothing to do with Sahaja Yoga. I was so flabbergasted, all I could do was say, okay. Now, he was a sinister fellow who did a great deal of harm later on, before he disappeared. And I doubt if many yogis in his position would have been as rude as he was. But in a way, he was expressing a common view of what Sahaja Yoga is and what it isn't. I experienced the same attitude a lot with that project to write about art, love, and truth. A few people would get it. They would see the point of it, would see the spiritual point of it. But for a long time, most people I knew would just look blank, as if to say, what's that got to do with anything? Then we come to another aspect of this business of SYUK and the questions with which it is concerned. And this is that for quite a few yogis, I feel their idea of how the Mahayoga is to be established is that it will take some vaguely socialist form. It won't, of course, be the nasty totalitarian kind of socialism, like every other kind of socialism and communism there has ever been, more or less. It will be a socialism with a human face, as they used to say, or maybe a socialism with a smiley, enlightened face. But how we are supposed to get from here, where we are now, to there, that enlightened socialist utopia, remains completely opaque. I mean, they may be right, I don't know, but there's another point. The thing I want to, sorry, that's, I didn't mean to say that. The thing I want to focus on here, and this is something I've noticed again and again, is that these people on the left, including yogis, and I imagine that, excuse me, many of the yogis who have a real interest in politics are on the left. They don't want to discuss first principles with people who take a more conservative Burkean position, Burkean meaning in the manner of Edmund Burke, whom I've talked about before. The reason for this may be a feeling that more conservative-minded people, because they're concerned with the legacy of the past, with conserving things, with traditional ideas of the family and of the nation state, are therefore left-sided, therefore backward, therefore not worth talking to. They haven't had their consciousness raised. That may be one reason. Though actually, I mean, it's worth adding that many of those intellectuals, the people like Jordan Peterson, Thomas Sowell was a great American thinker. They started off on the left, Marxism, before they moved more to the center. But I've often noticed also that there's what Jung would have called an animus effect too, in their reaction to things like art. It's an adamant, irrational attitude that just won't discuss anything with anyone who isn't either in complete agreement or isn't easily open to persuasion, like a student to a teacher. But we ought to be able to pool our ideas, to interact intellectually with one another in the light of vibratory awareness, of course, in a relatively detached way. Surely we should be able to do this, and it's a valid thing to do. To conclude, a friend of mine was telling me that he felt the Adi Shakti seminar in England this summer, which many people felt was a success, was a wasted opportunity. I was surprised to hear him say this, but on reflection, I can see his point of view. We're very inward looking. That's good, it's necessary up to a point, but we should be outward looking too, paying a deep, questioning, creative kind of attention to what is happening in the world. So I will ask Priti to play this talk of mothers. So this is an extract, about 7 minutes from the end of a great talk on the problem of inertia, the dangers of inertia. And it's not totally relevant to what I've been saying, though she does mention the Mahayoga. So, thank you.
One has to be very careful.
Bombs are still falling on children in Ukraine. I've been there, and I've seen for myself how the war is tearing little lives apart, and they still really, really need help.
Another very big problem of inertia is that people say, now Sahaj Yoga will do everything. Where is Sahaj Yoga? It exists within you. It's in your own kundalini, in your own hands, in your own feet. Before realization, effortlessness is all right. After realization, you have to be dynamic. For example, when you have to enlighten the light doesn't move here and there, otherwise you cannot enlighten. But after enlightenment, it has to give light. Otherwise, what's the use of enlightening it? So everybody has to start moving about and trying to work out Sahaj Yoga everywhere, every place, every person that you get. Talk to them in a way that they feel convinced that you are sensible people. The other day I was telling them that I do not say that you should dress up in a way that is aggressive, but also not dress up in a way that is repulsive. Right from dressing up, you go further, the way you talk to people. Then go deeper into it. It's very easy for anybody to make out whether you are genuine or not. And the most important is how far you have achieved in Sahaj Yoga is the point they are going to see. Not me, they are going to see you. We all have to spread Sahaj Yoga, it is very important. And England is very important, much more than Europe or India. And that's why I hope you all will understand your responsibility. First and foremost is to be humble. Try to be humble. Humble because so far you have not known what is the truth or the reality is. To know it, you have to be humble. Because it doesn't come to you out of arrogance. It comes through It penetrates in you. It seeps through you if you are humble. Otherwise, it does not. I am warning you. It does not. It doesn't go to arrogant people and to aggressive people. It doesn't work out in them. It only works out among humble people. Try to be humble in your heart. You enjoy your humility. You really enjoy your humility. Actually, humility gives you innocence. Humility is the only way to achieve our lost innocence. Even if you have all the powers of the world and you are humble, how beautiful you look. Any person who is in a big position and if he is humble, people write legends after such a personality. Try to develop a humble attitude towards life, extremely humble. But with humility we confuse inertia. That's the wrong thing. Humility never means inertia. Humility means dynamism. And that dynamism is extremely quiet, silent and beautiful. Sahaja Yoga is a tremendous thing. It's Mahayoga. At this stage it is Mahayoga. Because it has reached its highest peak now. Never in any incarnation so many realizations were given. Krishna used to do Sahaja Yoga. He used to raise Kundalini. Rama did that. Christ did it. Buddha did it. Mahavira did it. Nobody could achieve mass realization today. It's so fortunate that I am facing so many saints. It's my great fate and great fortune that you all have got realization. You don't know, my joy has no words to express it. But let not this garden be ruined by abandonment and by foolishness. It is tender, newly blossoming, beautiful garden. Look after it with that care and gentleness. Otherwise, it can all fritter away. Most of the fake gurus are being exposed now. They are all going to be exposed. They'll fritter away because they are false. But if Sahaja Yoga fritters away, you English Sahaja Yogis will be held responsible because of your inertia or your arrogance. When you are active, you are arrogant. When you are not, you are lethargic. Please come out of these two extremes. I request you to meditate on this about yourself. And I'm sure we are going to achieve wonders. Definitely, no doubt about it. May God bless you all.
So we'll have a meditation now. I'll just say a few things. I don't like the word guidance, but that kind of thing. Perhaps I should add to what I was saying earlier that I hope it's clear. I hope it's clear that I'm not suggesting at all that right wing is better than left wing, conservative is better than socialist, or the other way around, or anything. But that we have to be free of these political identifications. And we have to strive to be wise in how we view the world around us and what needs to be done. And we can only be wise if we are free of those political, cultural identifications. Sometimes it seems that we need to move a little to the left, sometimes to the right. I happen to feel myself, but it's only my view, that at the moment, many conservative thinkers have things of more value to say, of more concern with the deep problems that we face. But I'm very willing to be argued against. But it would be nice if there was that freedom to discuss. So in our meditation, if we, in our introspection, think of being free, that we are free, that if enlightenment hasn't given us this freedom from condition, from misidentifications, then there is a problem. So in our freedom, let us know that as Mother is our guru on the one hand, so we are our own gurus on the other. All right, so if Priti would like to play some beautiful music that was played for Srimataji, and then So we've got 5 minutes left. We usually finish at 9. And I thought I would read another poem, except I've just lost the place. But here's a nice one. This is also by Miłosz, the great poet. This one is rather unusual. It's really a prose poem. It's called Christopher Robin. In April of 1996, the international press carried the news of the death at age 75 of Christopher Robin Mill, immortalized in a book by his father, A. Mill, Winnie the Pooh as Christopher Robin. This poem, or this prose poem, only makes sense if you know Winnie the Pooh, but many people do, and I really recommend it if you don't. It's a unique book, absolutely unique, and Milne must have really tapped into the unconscious through a door that no one else had opened. I must think suddenly of matters too difficult for a bear of little brain. I've never asked myself what lies beyond the place where we live, I and Rabbit, Piglet and Eeyore, with our friend Christopher Robin. That is, we continued to live there, and nothing changed, and I just ate my little something. Only Christopher Robin left for a moment. Owl says that immediately beyond our garden, time begins, and that it is an awfully deep well. If you fall in it, you go down and down very quickly, and no one knows what happens to you next. I was a bit worried about Christopher Robin falling in, but he came back, and then I asked him about the well. Old bear, he answered, I was in it, and I was falling, and I was changing as I fell. My legs became long. I was a big person. I wore trousers down to the ground. I had a grey beard. Then I grew old, hunched, and I walked with a cane, and then I died. It was probably just a dream. It was quite unreal. The only real thing was you, old bear, and our shared fun. Now I won't go anywhere, even if I'm called for an afternoon snack. That's a nice poem. And here's another one. This is a bit more serious, perhaps. Again, it's a prose poem. Very real, I think. Awakened. So these are poems he wrote when he was in his 90s. In In advanced age, my health worsening, I woke up in the middle of the night and experienced a feeling of happiness so intense and perfect that in all my life I had only felt its premonition. And there was no reason for it. It didn't obliterate consciousness. The past which I carried was there together with my grief, and it was suddenly included, was a necessary part of the whole, as if a voice were repeating, "You can stop worrying now. Everything happened just as it had to. You did what was assigned to you, and you are not required anymore to think of what happened long ago." The peace I felt was a closing of accounts and was connected with the thought of death. The happiness on this side was like an announcement of the other side. I realized that this was an undeserved gift, and I could not grasp by what grace it was bestowed on me. So, there you are, some nice poems, and that's all for this evening. I wish that we may all go deeper and deeper into the love of our mother. Jai Shri Mataji.
Jai Shri Mataji, Chris. We're just going to, for 1 second, share a poster.
Oh, yes, do. So this is a poster alerting us to the event on Sunday the 26th, Worcester Hall. If you're in London, I'm sure you'll be going.